The whole thing blew up over a parking pass. It started on a Thursday morning. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, watching the sun crawl over the rooftops of our sleepy subdivision in Westbridge Oaks. That's when I saw her, Deborah Linscott, the HOA president. Middle-aged, permanently scowling, and always dressed like she was headed to court, even if it was just the mailbox. She marched up my walkway like it was a runway. No good morning, no smile, just straight to the point. "Jordan," she said, arms crossed like she'd been rehearsing. "I need another guest parking pass for my niece. She'll be visiting for the next few weeks." I set my mug down. "Deborah, I already gave you your 2. That's the limit, HOA's own rules." She narrowed her eyes like I'd just insulted her haircut. "I'm the president of the HOA. I think I know how this works." I pushed myself up from the chair. "Then you know I'm on the parking committee, and the rulebook says 2 per household max. Doesn't matter if your niece is the Queen of England." Deborah's lips twitched. "Jordan, don't be difficult." "Just print me another one." "Can't," I said. "It gets audited. You want me to lose my spot on the committee over your niece's 3rd car?" She paused. A flicker of something, maybe surprise I wasn't rolling over, crossed her face. Then came the classic pivot. "Well," she huffed, "don't be shocked when I bring this up at the next board meeting. You're not exactly Mr. Popular around here." She turned on her heel and stomped off, but not before muttering something about power-tripping men who think they own the place. Funny thing, though, I actually did own a little more of the place than she realized. See, right across from my house was a small gravel lot. Not HOA property, privately owned. Most people didn't know that. Deborah had been using it for years like it was her personal overflow, parking her niece, her bridge club, even her dog groomer. The owner had put it up for sale a week ago, and I'd quietly made an offer. I hadn't told anyone, not even my neighbor, Greg. The deal closed 2 days ago. I hadn't even put up a sign yet. So when Deborah and her niece parked there again on Saturday, I just watched. Then I called a tow truck. I didn't even say anything as the red Lexus got hauled off. I sat on my porch, same coffee mug in hand, watching the scene unfold like it was a matinee. Deborah sprinted down the street shrieking, "Where is it? Where's the car?" I stood and waved. "Hey Deborah, you looking for the Lexus?" She whipped around. "Yes, someone towed it." "That's illegal." "Nope," I said. "That lot's privately owned now. I bought it." She froze like I'd slapped her. "You what?" "I own it," I said, walking toward her, hands in my pockets. "Closed on it Thursday. Put up a sign this morning. Guess you didn't see it." "You can't do that," she snapped. "Pretty sure I can," I said. "And I did. You'll want to let your niece know the impound lot closes early on weekends." She stared at me, mouth open, no words coming out. For once, I turned and walked back to my porch, feeling like I'd just hit a game-winning home run. But I should have known Deborah wouldn't take the loss quietly. She was just getting started. By Monday morning, everything felt off. The usual neighborhood rhythm, dogs barking, sprinklers ticking, joggers waving, was replaced by a weird hush. A kind of manufactured calm, like everyone was waiting for a match to hit gasoline. I opened my garage and found a bright orange violation notice slapped across my driveway. The font was bold, aggressive. "Unauthorized exterior modification pending fine. $500. I stared at it for a full minute. There was no modification. My driveway hadn't changed in years. No cracks, no paint, no construction, just plain concrete. Greg, my neighbor 2 houses down, walked over as I peeled the notice off. "You see this?" I held it up like a dead rat. He nodded. "They're handing them out like coupons. My wife got one for a non-native plant species in our front bed. It was lavender." That's when it clicked. Deborah wasn't going to challenge me directly. She was going to bleed me dry with fake fines and phony violations, hoping I'd cave or retaliate in a way she could weaponize. But I wasn't wired like that. I didn't explode. I documented. By noon, I'd installed 2 security cameras. One pointed at my driveway, the other toward the lot across the street. I also filed a formal dispute with the City Code Enforcement Office. Unlike the HOA, the city had actual legal standards for citations. 5 minutes into the phone call, the clerk laughed. "They cited you for concrete. That's not even in your HOA's jurisdiction." I thanked her, hung up, and scanned the HOA bylaws I'd saved on my laptop. There it was, buried on page 37. All fines must reference a specific code clause and be accompanied by a time-stamped photo. Mine had neither. That evening, I printed out 5 copies of the HOA's bylaws and started highlighting. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to crack open the whole rotten system. The real bomb dropped the next day. An envelope arrived from the HOA marked urgent. Inside was a letter accusing me of operating an unlicensed commercial parking facility on my own lot. According to the letter, multiple residents had complained that I was charging unauthorized fees for vehicle storage. I almost laughed, but this wasn't just pettiness anymore. This was legal defamation. They were manufacturing a paper trail to justify seizing or controlling the lot. If they succeeded, they could legally annex it into HOA control through something called a common area acquisition motion, a clause I'd missed in the fine print that allowed the HOA to petition for control of adjacent property if it was deemed vital to community function. That's when I knew I needed help. My cousin Kira was a real estate attorney in downtown Fairview. She owed me a favor from back when I helped her renovate her fixer-upper. I called her that night and laid everything out: Deborah's vendetta, the fake fines, the bogus complaint letter. Kira didn't hesitate. This is fraud. Mail fraud, even. If they're sending forged accusations through the Postal Service, that's a felony. She promised to draft a cease and desist letter by morning and file a request for an injunction against the HOA's attempt to acquire the lot. She also had a contact at the county clerk's office who could fast-track a property boundary certification, proof the lot was not, and had never been, part of the HOA's jurisdiction. The next morning, I handed a copy of the cease and desist to Deborah personally. She was tending to her azaleas when I walked up the sidewalk. She didn't look up. "I don't have time for whatever tantrum you're throwing now," she said. "This isn't a tantrum," I said, handing her the envelope. "It's a legal warning. You've been sending out fraudulent citations." "That's a federal offense." She took it slowly, as if touching the paper might burn her. "You're bluffing." "No," I said, "but you are, and I'm done playing along." She opened the envelope. Her face shifted as she read first confusion, then panic, then something close to rage. "You're threatening the integrity of this neighborhood," she snapped. "You think you can just bully your way out of this? I run the board, I have the votes. That lot serves the community. That lot," I interrupted, "has been used illegally by you and your friends for years. I have video proof now. And you just tried to fabricate a commercial zoning violation. That's felony territory, Deborah." She didn't respond, just gripped the paper tighter until her knuckles turned white. I turned and left without another word. By Thursday, things escalated again. An HOA board member I barely knew, Alan Cho, showed up at my door around dusk. He looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot like he wanted to run back to his Prius. "I didn't know what she was doing," he said quietly. "I thought the letter was real." "She told us you were trying to turn the lot into a rental space for RVs." "She lied," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, I figured that out when I saw the footage you posted." I hadn't posted anything, which meant someone else had, probably Greg. He'd asked to use my footage to protect his wife from her lavender fine. I'd given him access to the files. He must have shared the clips with other neighbors. Alan handed me a USB drive. There's a recording from the last board meeting. She didn't know I was still logged into the Zoom call after it ended. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The audio was grainy but clear enough. Deborah's voice. "I don't care if it's legal. He needs to be isolated. If he wins, others will start questioning things. I want enough paper on his doorstep to bury him." Another voice, female, unsure. "What if he sues?" "He won't. People like him always back down once you make them feel alone." I copied the file twice, one for Kira, one for the city attorney's office. On Friday morning, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. First, a letter from the Fairview County Recorder arrived officially confirming that my lot was not under any HOA governance, and that no common area acquisition motion could be filed without unanimous neighbor consent. That would never happen. Greg alone would fight it to the grave. Second, 2 unmarked cruisers pulled up to Deborah's house. Turns out, mailing a falsified zoning violation wasn't just mail fraud, it was also impersonating a municipal authority. Someone had filed a formal complaint with the county DA's office. I didn't ask who. Might have been Kira. Might have been Alan. Deborah was escorted out calmly, but not without protest. "You're making a mistake," she shouted at the officers. "He's manipulating you." "He's dangerous," one of the officers replied. "Ma'am, you're being investigated for multiple counts of fraud and abuse of authority. You'll have a chance to explain everything with your attorney present." Neighbors watched from their porches, some whispering, others recording. No one stepped forward to defend her. That weekend, the HOA held an emergency session. Alan was voted interim president. The fake citations were voided. All fines issued in the past 60 days were frozen pending review. The board voted to create an independent oversight committee composed of non-board residents. Greg was elected chair. By Sunday, I was back on my porch, same coffee mug in hand. Greg walked by with his dog. "You think she's done?" he asked. "I think she underestimated how much people remember when you push them around too long," I said. He grinned. "You're not just a parking committee guy anymore, huh?" "Guess not," I said, "but I'll keep the cameras up, just in case anyone else gets ideas." From the sound of it, no one would. Not for a long time. Kira called early Monday with a tone I hadn't heard from her in years, tight, methodical, and just a shade below furious. "I had a records request go through this morning. You're going to want to sit down." I was already pacing. "The HOA board," she continued, "submitted forged minutes to the county clerk's office last month. They claimed a vote was held to classify your lot as a shared use parcel. They even signed off on it with falsified initials from 3 board members, 2 of whom had already resigned." I stopped pacing. "That's criminal, right? It's document tampering, perjury, and attempted unlawful annexation," she said. "All 3 are felonies." "I've already handed it to the assistant district attorney." There was a pause. Then she added, "They're calling it organized fraud now." Within an hour, a subpoena was issued for all HOA board communications over the past 6 months. Greg, now chair of the Oversight Committee, confirmed that the board's private chat logs hosted on a cloud server paid for by HOA dues had already been preserved. That afternoon, I met with the assistant DA, a wiry, fast-talking guy named Lucas Tran. He'd been following the case since Kira passed him the forged minutes. He laid out the potential charges like he was reading a grocery list: forgery, wire fraud, abuse of authority. And if we can prove they knowingly used HOA funds to support these activities. Embezzlement, he leaned forward, folding his hands. "And you're not the only one they targeted," he said. "We pulled financials. Over 20 homeowners were fined for violations that don't exist in any version of the bylaws. That's thousands of dollars redirected to a discretionary fund that no one seems to have oversight on." I felt my jaw clench. "So where does that money go?" He gave a dry laugh. "Right now, we're guessing kickbacks to vendors, personal renovations, maybe even legal fees to fight disputes they triggered themselves." He offered me a witness affidavit form. I signed without hesitation. By Wednesday, subpoenas were flying. The HOA treasurer, Melissa Carr, had already flipped, agreeing to testify in exchange for immunity. She handed over a full ledger of unauthorized disbursements complete with handwritten notes from Deborah. One entry stood out: reimbursement, personal expense tow fee Jordan's lot, $375. The next day, a special town hall was called by the Oversight Committee. It wasn't just packed, it was standing room only. Residents who hadn't shown up to an HOA vote in years were lined up outside, clutching copies of fines, citations, and letters they'd received. Greg opened the meeting with a simple message: "We're not here to make speeches. We're here to show you what's been done to us." One by one, neighbors came forward, a single mother fined for having a toddler's plastic trike on the porch. A retiree forced to repaint his shutters twice because the tone of green was too aggressive. A disabled veteran harassed over an ADA-compliant ramp. Then Alan stepped up, holding a folder. "These are the minutes Deborah submitted to the county," he said, "and these are the actual minutes. The ones I recorded myself." He played them over the speaker system. The real versions were short, procedural. The forged ones contained phantom votes, manufactured consensus, and invented language about community necessity. When the audio ended, Alan didn't say anything. He just let the silence stretch. Someone in the back finally muttered, "Throw her out." The room exploded in agreement, but it wasn't that easy. Deborah wasn't present. Her house had been dark since Tuesday. According to someone on her street, she'd left in a hurry the morning the subpoenas hit, trunk packed, garage half open. Dog left with a neighbor. The following morning, an arrest warrant was issued. They found her 2 towns over, staying at a short-term rental under her cousin's name. She answered the door in a robe and tried to claim she was on a wellness retreat. The officers weren't interested. At the same time, county auditors froze all HOA accounts. The discretionary fund was seized. Every board member under suspicion was suspended pending investigation, and a temporary administrator from the City Housing Authority was assigned to oversee operations. And then came the part no one saw coming. The HOA's insurance provider terminated their policy. Turns out coverage didn't extend to criminal activity. Without insurance, the HOA couldn't operate legally. No enforcement, no authority, no fines. For the first time in over a decade, Westbridge Oaks had no functioning HOA. Some residents panicked. Others celebrated. But most just stood there, blinking, like they couldn't believe it was real. The next week was chaos, but the good kind. Lawn chairs popped up at curbsides. Kids rode scooters on sidewalks that had once been forbidden. An elderly couple painted their shutters bright yellow. Greg and I helped them hang a wind chime, and then on Sunday something strange happened. A man I didn't recognize came to my door. Late 30s, pressed slacks, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Reyes," he asked. I nodded. "I'm with the Fairview Municipal Recovery Task Force. We've been instructed to conduct a community audit. Your HOA was the 6th in the county shut down due to organized misconduct." "6th," he nodded grimly. "It's a pattern. Rogue boards, fake violations, financial siphoning. You're not the first. But you're one of the few who pushed back hard enough to get the whole thing exposed." He handed me a document. "Would you be willing to provide testimony at the state hearing in July?" I scanned the paper. It wasn't just about Deborah anymore. It was about policy, accountability, reform. I nodded. "I'll be there." He gave a grateful smile and left. As I stood there, I caught sight of the gravel lot across the street. The new signs were still up. Private property, no parking, no exceptions. But something about them felt less like a warning now and more like punctuation. Not a threat, just the final period on the last sentence of a long, bitter chapter. That evening, Greg and I met on the porch. He brought over a 6-pack and a folder. "Got something for you," he said, flipping it open. Inside was a petition, dozens of signatures. "What's this?" I asked. "A proposal. Residents want a new council, not an HOA, just a neighborhood board. Voluntary, transparent, no fines, no power grabs, just community decisions made together." I flipped through the pages. Familiar names, people I hadn't spoken to much before this all started. "They want you to chair it," Greg said, holding out a pen. I stared at the lines. Something settled in my chest, not pride exactly. Just a quiet certainty that we'd taken something broken and made it whole again. I signed. Whatever came next, it wasn't going to be about power. It was going to be about people. Late spring brought a strange quiet to Westbridge Oaks, one that wasn't manufactured by fear or fine threats, but by the sudden absence of them. The HOA's grip had been severed clean, and the neighborhood was stretching out, as if finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. Still, the aftershocks hadn't stopped. Not even close. A week after Deborah's arrest, subpoenas issued to the former board members began producing results. City investigators uncovered a string of payments made to a third-party landscaping company, Green Core Solutions, that didn't appear to exist. Over $25,000 in invoices had been submitted and approved under Deborah's tenure, each signed off without a matching work order or even a basic description beyond monthly maintenance. Kira called me again, this time with her voice lower than usual. The company's address leads to a P.O. box registered to a shell corporation, and that shell belongs to a trust managed by Deborah's brother. It's blatant laundering. I tightened my grip on the phone. "How far back?" 3 years, she said. possibly more. The auditors are still combing through the HOA's digital archives. It's bigger than anyone realized. The city's housing fraud division requested a formal deposition from me, and I agreed, meeting with their legal team in a windowless downtown office that smelled faintly of copier toner and old coffee. I laid out everything: how she tried to weaponize bylaws, how the fabricated fines escalated, how the forged meeting minutes were meant to annex the lot I'd purchased. The lead investigator, a woman in her 50s with eyes that scanned like an airport security wand, didn't take many notes. She simply nodded, occasionally tapping her pen against her chin. "Mr. Reyes," she said after I finished, "in your opinion, was this a vendetta or an operation?" I didn't hesitate. It started as a vendetta, then she realized she liked the power. And when no one stopped her, it became both. The next day, 2 federal agents showed up at the old HOA office, a one-room suite above a dry cleaner 3 miles from the neighborhood. They left with 5 computers, a locked filing cabinet, and a safe that had been bolted to the floor. No one had even known it was there. News vans began circling by the weekend. By then, residents had taken to organizing block socials instead of board meetings. The old bulletin board near the mail kiosk had been repurposed. Flyers for lost pets, tutoring services, and weekend barbecues replaced the usual notices about acceptable mailbox colors and hedge height regulations. Still, there was unfinished business. A handful of former board members, those who hadn't been directly involved, had quietly left the neighborhood, putting their homes on the market at suspiciously low prices. One, a man named Russell from the Architectural Review Committee, had cleared out overnight, leaving his porch furniture and a garage full of unopened paint cans behind. Others weren't so lucky. Alan, who'd helped expose the fake minutes, brought over a letter one evening. It was from a law firm representing former HOA treasurer Melissa Carr, the same one who'd turned over the financial ledgers. "She's claiming emotional duress," Alan said, handing me the paper. "Wants to avoid civil liability. She's offering to return the money she received, just under $6,000, if the neighborhood agrees not to pursue damages." I read the letter twice. "She's trying to settle. She's scared," Alan replied. Apparently she's been subpoenaed by a federal grand jury next month. The newly formed resident council decided to reject the settlement, not out of malice but because they wanted a full accounting. Every dollar, every decision, every abuse justified under the guise of community standards. Then came the most surreal moment of all. Deborah, out on bail and awaiting trial, filed a motion to access the HOA's remaining funds, claiming she needed them to pay her legal fees. Her attorney, a man whose last name sounded like a European dessert, argued that as the last duly elected president, she retained fiduciary access until her term expired. The judge, a sharp-tongued circuit court veteran with no tolerance for theatrics, dismissed the motion with prejudice. He looked directly at Deborah that morning in court and said, "Misusing authority does not entitle you to defend yourself with the spoils. You're not a president, you're a defendant." The courtroom fell silent, except for one man in the back who let out a quiet, involuntary chuckle. I didn't turn to see who it was. The trial was set for September. But by July, the evidence was overwhelming: bank records, witness statements, falsified documents, and a paper trail of misappropriated funds traced to at least 4 other neighborhoods Deborah had consulted for over the years. The pattern was the same. She'd offer governance workshops, train board members on how to enforce compliance efficiently, and leave behind a trail of untraceable service contracts and quietly redirected dues. The state attorney general's office stepped in, announcing a sweeping investigation into what they now called a coordinated abuse of HOA authority for personal enrichment. It was no longer about Westbridge Oaks. It was about a broken system she'd learned to manipulate, and the people who'd finally stopped her. By late August, she pled guilty to 3 counts of fraud and 1 count of criminal conspiracy to misappropriate community funds. The plea deal required full restitution, a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state, and a 5-year prison sentence with eligibility for parole after 3. But the kicker. She was required to make a public statement of apology, to be read aloud at the next city-wide HOA compliance seminar, an event previously run by her own consulting company. They streamed it live. She stood behind a podium, hair pulled back, voice strained, and read the statement line by line. No defiance, no dramatic flares, just a flat, reluctant admission. I misused the trust of my community. I prioritized control over cooperation. I allowed personal grievances to dictate public policy. I regret my actions. When it ended, no one clapped, no one booed. The room simply moved on. The lot I'd bought became a symbol of sorts, not of ownership, but of resistance. Eventually, I converted it into a community garden. Greg and I laid out the beds in neat rows, and neighbors signed up to maintain them. Tomatoes, squash, herbs, even a few blueberry bushes. Kids started showing up with watering cans, asking questions about soil and sun. We never put up a fence. One afternoon, as I was trimming back overgrowth, a woman I didn't recognize walked up holding a clipboard and a half-eaten granola bar. "You Jordan?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm with the county's Housing Reform Task Force. We're collecting case studies for a new legislative proposal. Would you be willing to let us use your story?" I looked around at the rows of green and the laughter of kids chasing each other between planters. "Sure," I said. "But make sure it's not about me. Make it about what happens when people stop letting fear look like order." She smiled and jotted something down. Before she left, she asked one more question. "Why'd you do it?" Buying the lot, standing up to her, all of it. I paused, leaning on the garden spade. "Because it was mine, and because no one should have to ask permission to live in peace." She nodded and walked off. I went back to the soil. Westbridge Oaks had changed. Not overnight, not easily, and not without scars, but it had changed. The fences weren't taller. The rules weren't stricter. The people were louder, freer, and finally heard. And most importantly, no one asked for parking passes anymore.